In this video, we will go over how to use the solubility table. The solubility table will tell us whether a particular compound is soluble in water or not. If it is not soluble in water, we call it insoluble, and it will form what is known as a precipitate. A precipitate is just a solid that comes out, leaving out the supernatant with spectator ions. So the solubility table is a tool that you can use to determine the solubility. It is something that we do not memorize, though I do ask students to memorize all nitrates are soluble because that's very easy to memorize. And you can use the one in the textbook, you can use the one on the internet, you can use anything as a consultation for the exam. With that being said, let's do a practice problem that's part of your homework assignment. Characterize the following compounds as soluble or insoluble in water. The first one is calcium carbonate, CaCO3. So we're going to go to our solubility table here. And here, okay, I'm looking at carbonate. It's calcium carbonate. And it tells us all carbonates and phosphates are insoluble except those of sodium, potassium, and ammonia. And the problem is telling us calcium. So calcium carbonate is insoluble. So that's the answer to part A. You would expect calcium carbonate to come out of water and not be soluble in water. All right, our next item here are the sulfates, zinc sulfate, particularly zinc sulfate. So right here we have the sulfates. All sulfates are soluble, so zinc sulfate should be soluble. Barium sulfate, lead 2 sulfate, calcium sulfate, and strontium sulfate are not soluble. Zinc sulfate is soluble. So you can dissolve zinc sulfate in water, is basically what this is saying. And that will form an aqueous solution. Mercury 2 nitrate, automatically without consulting anything, all nitrates are soluble. That's the key phrase that I want you to memorize. All nitrates are soluble, and that will definitely dissolve in water. Our next one here is mercury sulfate. That looks like mercury in the +2 form. And I'm going back to our solubility table here. Sulfates, all sulfates are soluble except barium sulfate is insoluble, lead sulfate is insoluble, calcium sulfate, strontium sulfate, and it looks to me like our candidate here is mercury. That will be soluble. So answer to part D is soluble. And then finally we have ammonium perchlorate. Again, here's ammonia. So all salts of sodium ion, potassium ion, ammonium ion are soluble except several uncommon ones. So ammonium chlorate will be soluble. So using this here, the ammonium ion solubility, not the perchlorate ion solubility. So ammonium chlorate, the answer to this is that it is soluble.